And the community input was yes or less, few people said. We got a lot of that feedback from the task force group. The public group, like Julie said, about half the people left at one point in time before we got to this question, but we didn't get as clear feedback from the public. It was a little more mixed. We talked about a lot of options and what it meant in different ways, but they weren't as ready to give us a clear yes or no kind of discussion on this. We did get some feedback that, you know, the task force felt this was a good middle of the road type approach. It wasn't going over the top. It was trying to, especially the 75,000 square foot schemes, seemed like they were kind of finding a sweet spot that maybe was affordable and met the library needs, though we still have to prove that. Other people pointed out it's really an only 2% increase in taxes when you look at the whole tax bill, and that was part of Julie's presentation, and that there's added value to the homeowner, and they felt all those things should kind of be stressed. The fact is, we still have to talk about the dollar figures in the question that goes to the public. And then we've developed a little bit more information since then, kind of talking about comparing it to other referendums. And we worked with on projects that CCS has worked on, as well as Nagle Hartrey. We're very familiar with where the numbers are in this. We started looking at, the first column shows what the size of the original building was, what it was expanded to, and kind of a rough idea of how much that increased. So like the DeKalb Public Library at the top is a 400% increase in area. Now, the factor in that is they built the building in 1930 with private donations. They never passed a referendum to do anything along the way. They got a large library grant and some money from the city. They didn't pass a referendum to go up to 425% increase, but they were kind of overdue for a large increase. So, the fact is, these other schemes were all passed through referendums. I'd say the outlier in this is really Orland Park, which had a very small library and did a very large addition. All the rest of them were kind of more in the 200% increase, basically doubling, which has been Don and my experience. You get around 2 to 2.5 times the existing library. You can find support. It gets harder to go for the size of tax increase you need to get to 3 to 4 times the size of the library. So the center area here has averages of how you can look at it. The first one includes all of them. The second one, probably more relevant, all the ones that were passed by referendum. If you take out the one outlier of the 500%, it's 211%. So they've all a little bit more than doubled their size. It's kind of a typical range. This isn't a definite fact. This isn't a way, it's just a comparison. It's not necessarily a formula to get to where you're going, but it helps inform you. Then we've plugged in across the bottom where the 2009 was a 370% increase. Where we were at 94,000 was 348% increase in library area. And the schemes 2 and 3, both with a renovation based on the 75,000, is more in a 2 3/4 kind of increase, which is still a substantial increase in size of the library, but it's not the full program that has been laid out.
So, you know, one of the reasons that we're showing this is not because we think that this should drive the decision about how big to make your library, but just to provide some context. You know, from the very beginning, we've been talking about the necessity to balance your space needs with the cost for the project, what the community is going to support. And I think we're at a kind of second critical point in our process right now. I think the first critical point was when you decided to stay on this site. I think we're at a kind of second critical point now, which is we're trying to strike this balance now between the cost, the program area, how it fits on the site, all of those things. And so a lot of what Eric's been talking about so far tonight has been kind of leading up to this, the idea of a 75,000 square foot building. I mean, we didn't arrive at that arbitrarily. That was kind of arrived at thinking about the referendum costs, and you know, how do you kind of back into that number. And so I think then it becomes incumbent on us to test that and see how does it work. And so I think we've done that in terms of the site planning and showing you how it fits on the site and what the associated parking is with that. I think we've taken it a step further, and this is what we want to start talking about tonight. What does it mean inside the library? Because I think when you tell people that we started with a building program that's 100,000, 95,000 square feet, and now we're proposing to take it down to 75,000. You know, what's happening? You know, what are we losing, you know, if we do that? Is it still represent a significant enough improvement for the library that it's worth it for the public to fund it? The last thing we want to do is get a referendum passed that only puts you in a position where it sets you up for the next referendum 5 or 10 years down the road because you didn't do it well enough. So I think, you know, this is what we're starting to test right now to make sure, you know, that this part of the equation will work as well. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So,
before we jump into that, I was just talking to Carl, and we feel like I should probably do the quick version of what I did for the public. We had talked about doing it, and then we said no. I think, yeah, maybe yes. The initial, Lisa's struggling over here to get this flash drive to work with us. The beginning of the presentation is about our library and the tax impact and where we've come from. This library was actually begun in, it started with a bequest to the village of Plainfield from the McCluster family to establish a tax-supported library in about 1919. Then it was followed up by a bequest from the Nimmons family in 1925, and those two bequests were the basis of beginning a library. And then the library was also the beneficiary of a bequest, a charitable remainder trust of a 160-acre farm by a lady named Fanny Stratton, and that was received in 1954. Now the reason that this is all so significant is that this library was literally built on bequests. The first two entire library buildings were built on the dollars of those first two bequests. And Lisa's still struggling. Oh, there we go. So let's see if we can get me on one side. Oh, it's
It seemed to work better when I aimed at the wall.
You actually have to aim it to the
TV. Oh, there we go. All right, so George and Marietta, they're right here. So when we actually had the original library was over here at the what is now the Heritage Professional Center. It's this building right here. It was about 750 square feet, a 25 by 30 building with a separate toilet building. Doesn't that sound like fun? Anyway, so McCluster's and Nimmons paid for that one. Then in 1940, they had decided they outgrew it, so they went to what you're standing in. We're in this original library. It was 2736 in total square footage, and there were no taxpayer funds to build this second building either. It was all the remainder of that McCluster and Nimmons bequests. When they went 10 times the size, from 2,700 square feet to 27,000 square feet, opened in 1991, it was actually $1.9 million in taxpayer funds. The remainder was selling the farm, and then a small state grant. The original amount for the building was $2.8 million, and that was leaving the lower 2/3 of the building unfinished. In 1996, they finished the remainder, and that was done entirely on the remainder of the Stratton bequest. So this community has paid half of one building. So that's where we are. Now, how do you figure out how much space you need for a library? You start with your space needs analysis. Wonderful guy named Anders Dahlgren from Library Planning Associates works with us on this. And he takes all sorts of data about libraries nationally, regionally, statewide, etc., mashes them all together, does trend lines, all sorts of very cool data points. But it comes down to the board deciding who they want to compare themselves to. We could decide that we wanted to be in the top 10% nationally for libraries that serve our population. But that's not us. So this board decided, as the board did back for the 2009 referendum, that we wanted to be middle of the road. 50th percentile for collar counties in Illinois, so really comparing ourselves to our peers. So that all being said, in the data crunching back in 2008, when we put together the projections for the 2009 referendum, the projections for our population was 120,000 people by 2030, with a total projected space need of over 134,000 square feet of library space. That was really huge. This year, we have gotten back an estimated service population by 2040 of only 109,000 folks, and a total library square footage need of about 94,000 square feet. But in 2009, the project that went on the ballot was not 134,000 square feet. It was 100,000 square feet. The project was to sell alternate revenue bonds to build 70,000 square feet of library space here on this downtown site, to build a branch of about 30,000 square feet, and to do an increase to the operating rate. Remember, this library has never passed an operating tax rate in its history. So we're still at the statutory minimum. So we went from 2,700 to 27,000 square feet with no operating rate increase. Back in the early 1990s, we did have to really scale back. They severely cut hours, they froze the book budget, they laid off half the staff. The only thing that brought it back was the population boom. So that 2009 referendum was at a level for the average household in Plainfield. Average household fair market value at that time was $315,000, and that average household would have paid an increase of $15 a month, or about $180 for the year. So this is today's tax bill. Today, your Plainfield Public Library amounts to 2.1% of your total tax bill. Your average home in Plainfield, which is now $295,000 average fair market value for a home here in our Plainfield Library District, they would pay about $190 for the year for library service, amounting to 2.1% of their total tax bill. The average household total tax bill is $8,858.07, just for the sake of argument. This is your tax bill as a pie. Well, as you can see, the yellow piece, very small, that's the library at 2.1%. We are most comparable, actually, to the blue smaller pie up toward the top, and that is 2.1% for your Forest Preserve District. That is the most comparable to us. Now, out of all the entities on your property tax bill, the top 5 comprise 90% of your total tax bill. That's your school district, your fire protection district, village, county, and the community college. Those are the top 5, and they comprise 90%. So the library, in comparison, is a very small percentage. When we're talking about a library tax increase, you're talking a whole decimal point away and not even anywhere near rounding up from where your total tax bill is. Because most people think about that the big 4-digit number, and we're talking a very small 3-digit number. So what do we look like in comparison to other libraries? We have 3 in our area that are fairly comparable to us in population served, so we chose to look at those. The one in the state of Illinois that's actually closest to us in population is the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, and we will not be comparing ourselves to them. They have 132,000 square feet of library space and a budget that is 4 times ours. Anyway, so this is a lot more realistic. Your library serves 75,337 people out of 27,160 square feet with a total tax rate of 0.2057 mils That's just over 20 cents per $100 of equalized assessed valuation on your home. If you ever want a lesson on how to read your tax bill, what fair market value means as opposed to equalized assessed valuation, I will gladly go over that with you at a separate time. And your average household cost is $190.14. So what we did here for these comparisons is I took this year's tax rate from each of these entities and applied it to that average household in Plainfield. So if that $295,000 house were in one of these districts, this is what they would pay. Fountaindale serves almost 68,000 people. They have 114,000 square feet of library space. Their total tax rate is 0.5805. Yes, that is almost 3 times ours. And their average household cost is over $536. Moving on to our next closest neighbor that has also recently expanded, we have the White Oak Library District. They actually have 3 locations because that does serve 3 separate communities: Romeoville, Crest Hill, and Lockport. They serve just under 78,000 people. They have 89,750 square feet of library space on 3 locations. The Romeoville is the largest of their 3 libraries. It's about 46,000 square feet. Now, what Fountaindale gets for their money here, they actually have some really great 21st century library services that are kind of unique, and it's one of the reasons for the difference in cost. They have a digital media lab and a lot of technology-based services that are exclusive to their residents. The Digital Media Lab, you can record audio and video. You can check out everything from an electronic guitar to an HD video camera. You can get help with learning to do audio and video and editing and all sorts of things. They have tech-enabled group study rooms that you can Skype and do all sorts of really great things. But that is residents only because they pay for it. Mm-hmm. White Oak, great services, very nice meeting rooms, nothing like Fountaindale's Digital Media Lab. And the Oswego Public Library is our other nearby comparison. They serve just under 59,000 people. They are about to open their new 2nd story addition on their Oswego Downtown Library. That will bring them to almost 72,000 square feet of total library space on 2 campuses. They do serve both Oswego and Montgomery, so that addition to their Oswego building will make those 2 buildings almost co-equal in size. Their total tax rate is 0.3247, so their average household would pay about $300. In the White Oak district, it would be about $299. So these are very comparable in cost as far as an average household payment for the library. And as you can see, square footage much larger than ours. So this brings us to the question that we put up to everyone and they alluded to earlier about framing this whole thing in terms of our 2009 referendum. That 2009 dollar amount would, at this point, almost double. So we would go from 2% of your total tax bill to about 4%. The additional amount would be about $15 per month if we applied that same kind of cost. So is that project, is that dollar amount cost something people are willing to entertain?
That's an in addition to.
In addition to. So that's in addition to the $190 you're paying, that's 2% of your tax bill. For a significant service improvement for the library, what would you be willing to pay per month? And that's what we took to everyone and looked at as far as all these concepts that the architects have put forward. So that's where we started, and now we will move back to what they
What we
have
would
figured
differ.
out. Yeah. To what does that mean?
Do we have any extra chairs?
They're in the hallway.
The pile of chairs, the stack of
Bill?
chairs is behind you there, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Wilson has entered the meeting but does not have a seat.
Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, you know, all of this is a way of trying to find the right balance, you know, and I think part of that for us, and part of making sure that what we propose to the community now is something that they're willing to support and is something that is going to serve you well for the next generation, is to start to think about and figure out what is it about your community and the service that you provide that's different from other libraries. And so the way we finally get around to this is we listen to conversation. You know, Anders has done a great job developing a program. We've had a couple of meetings with him. And during the course of those meetings, as we're reviewing square footages and things like that, and have conversations about where the area is going and what the library staff is interested in doing, we learn something about what we think your services are, you know, how to focus in on your services. So one of the ways that we start to think about how do we make the building smaller without compromising the service that you provide to the community, one of the ways that you do that is you look for flexible use in the spaces that you have within the building. One of the unusual program elements that you have in the library right now, in the Anders program, is the auditorium space, the performance space. And this is unusual for public libraries. I think it's a very interesting activity to accommodate in a public library space. When you think about the transition period that libraries are in right now, these are the kind of activities that you're starting to see them kind of move towards. It's not just about housing collections anymore. It's much more about, you know, providing those kind of community activities, resources. You know, content creation is one of the ways that we often refer to this kind of trend. You know, move from content consumption towards content creation. And so we're going to show you a very preliminary way of putting together a floor plan for the building on 3 floors. And there's a central feature to this that we really want to focus on tonight. And that's the area that you see located in the center of this building footprint here. So imagine that this box that you see represents that box at the north end of the site with the parking to the south of it. It represents a building that's about 75,000 total square feet. What we're proposing here, and the area that's shown in some detail in the center, is this kind of combination of meeting room spaces and activity spaces that will provide a great deal of flexibility within the library. We're proposing to locate it in the center of the library. Imagine where you see the label lobby and entry here. This is where you come into the building. And what we're proposing is to put a meeting room in the center here. There would be a 2-story space, and it would have movable walls really on all 4 sides of it. And the movable walls allow us to integrate it in different ways with the spaces that are adjacent to it. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a minute. But a couple of the other features here, one is an area that we've indicated as terrace seating off to one side, and I'll explain what that means in more detail in a minute. We've also got another meeting room space on the other side. So it's a way of starting to provide some flexibility. Now, if we did something like this and made this kind of a feature of the library when you come into the library building on the 1st floor, the other departments, the other program elements that would occupy the 1st floor would include the popular library services that we're showing right now on the east end of the building, the customer self-service, which really has to be off of the lobby and entry area, this back-of-house circulation department, which we've located on the west end because this is where we're proposing to have the book drop and service window so that you have direct access into that department from there, and then some additional meeting spaces. As we move up to the 2nd floor,
You got to dance with it.
so as we move up to the 2nd floor, most of the 2nd floor, the big program areas on the 2nd floor, are really youth services, which takes up almost half of the second floor. You also have the young adult area on the second floor, and then some back-of-house staff areas that include network services and other staff areas, as well as technical services. The area in the center here that says open to the meeting room spaces below, I'll explain that in more detail in a minute. And then finally, on the third floor, the third floor is given over to
Something you can't see.
the third floor is reference and nonfiction services, takes up about half of the third floor. We also have the administrative offices up there, together with some mechanical and support space on the third floor as well. So what I want to do now is I want to go back and talk in more detail about the central space on the first floor. There we go. All right, so this plan on the top here is that same plan that I just showed you, kind of, pulled out of the first floor. So again, for reference, imagine that you walk in the library here. You're facing this double height meeting room space that has movable walls on all four sides. Off to the one side here where we show terrace seating, the idea there would be that there's a stairway that goes up. So imagine that in most public libraries, you walk in the lobby space, there's usually a stair that gets you up to the second floor and up to the third floor of the building. Imagine that on one side of that stairway, as it goes up to the second floor, there's a series of platforms, terraces that align with the stairs that go across, that goes up about half a level. So what this represents is that you're going from the first floor, if this is the second floor here, you're going up to what would normally be the landing, halfway up the stair, and that represents the top of this area. So we're not talking about something that goes all the way up to the second floor. I think that would be too big. It would be, it'd be too much space to take up. But what you see here, the dark black line, the step line that you see here, represents the actual stairway that goes up. And then the light black line that you see behind it represents these terraces, these platforms that kind of align with it as you go across. So what you have here is a way to go up the stair and then a series of platforms. It's kind of like auditorium seating without being a formal auditorium. And these kind of spaces we're incorporating a lot into educational buildings right now. You're seeing it on college campuses a lot. We're also incorporating it into K-12 education spaces a lot. It becomes a kind of informal hangout space, if you will, within the library. But we've located it in a way that could also function to serve the meeting room itself. And I'll show you some diagrams about how that works together as well. So this is a section taken, if you kind of cut a line through here, and we're looking at what that space looks like. This is that two-story space in the center that we've called a multi-purpose room. Here's the terrace seating over here. This is a meeting room on the other side that could also be a stage. So you might imagine that if you had a performance or a lecture in there or something, that it could take place here. You could have this open in the center here and then the terrace seating on the other side. Or you could close off all of these spaces as well. Now, let me show you the diagrams that give a clearer idea about what our intention here. Our intention is here. So in diagram A, what we're showing here, we've labeled it maker space. That may not be a good label for it. The intention is that it becomes some kind of program space in the heart of the library, on the first floor in the heart of the library. This could accommodate programs that you have in the library right now. It could accommodate programs that you would like to have in the library but are unable to because you don't have the space for it. So that's what's shown in option A here. In this case, you can still have the terrace seating area, this kind of informal hangout area that would be separated from that space. You can also have the separated meeting room over here as well. That would be separated from that space. So you could have a meeting going on here, some other kind of activity going on in the multi-purpose room, and then the informal seating could be serving the library on a daily basis the way it always could. In option B, this shows if you're going to get an audience of about 300 people in this space. How could you accommodate that? So in this case, here's that stage area. So you move the one wall that separates the meeting room from the multi-purpose room. That now becomes a stage area. You get about 180 seats on the flat floor here. You get about another 100 seats on the terrace seating that goes up. Now when we say getting seats on the terrace seating, imagine if these are platforms. you get, they're basically cushions that kind of set on top of it, so it's kind of informal auditorium seating that could be placed there. But then that becomes one big audience space, and you open up the two other walls that define either side of that large multi-purpose room. In option C, this is showing what we've labeled as kind of an in-the-round type presentation. So you might have a presentation or a performance going on in that double height space in the center, and you could actually get audience on both sides of it as well. In the final scheme,